Okay, call to order the January 26th AMATS Policy Committee meeting. It's 1 o'clock. In attendance, we have Mr. Flynn, Mr. Sullivan, Ms. Edwards, Mr. Campbell. At this point, Mr. Birch is not in attendance. We'll make note if he comes in later. Mr. Lyon, could you give us our public involvement speech?
Yes, sir. All AMATS meetings are public meetings. The public is always invited to comment on items. If we have a business item, we will have the presentation by staff or consultants first, discussion by the committee, and at that point, the public will be given an opportunity to comment. So,
Thank you. And also note that if you're going to comment, we ask for the record that you give your name clearly so that it can be entered into the minutes. We have before us an agenda. Has everybody had a chance to look at the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion, any comments? Mr. Flynn? Anything else? Okay. So the agenda approved. Do we have any minutes, Mr. Lyons?
we will have some next month,
Okay.
holidays.
All right.
Mr. Chair, just as an information item, I do have to leave at 1:30 on the pronouncer at the spelling bee, so it's, but Mr. Michaelis is here to fill in, but we'll get to our
I think we've
business
got a
items.
pretty small business agenda. Thank you for So we have before us, I guess, 2 business items today, is that correct? Or are they combined into one business item?
We have 2 business items. I think the first business item, the MTP, will just have an update on the status of that creature.
Okay,
The second one, we do have something that needs to be voted on.
okay, let's move forward with item A then.
Okay. Mr. Spring is here to present.
I have a present for everyone. It's not Christmas, but
The 5 of each already.
Certainly not.
that's right. This is the public hearing draft of it now. I'll give someone the Birch one. It's
Later there.
just a real brief update. We update every month on the status of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Those copies you have are the released public hearing draft. This is the draft that will go through the approval process through the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Assembly, and the AMATS Policy Committee. The next version will be the final, we hope. You'll notice there, we made the amendments that the Policy Committee requested. 2 of them specifically were the changes to Project 201, which is the Sewer to Glen Highway connection, breaking that up into 4 phases, one of which is the overall environmental document. This project would connect the Sewer to Glen Highway between Chester Creek and I believe it'd be Airport Heights interchange. The other amendment we made in response to a request by the Policy Committee was to add an index specifying the locations within the plan where the Connect Arm Crossing was identified. And that is contained in Appendix A on page 12. A little bit shorter than I was expecting it to be, but I believe we covered all the relevant pages where the Connect Arm Crossing was mentioned, and we identify what the general subject matter is for each of those citations. So I think that would help to some extent for people who are interested in particular in the Connect Arm Crossing section of the plan to find those relevant sections.
When you say page, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
It's page 12 in Appendix A.
Page 12. Page 12.
A12.
Page 12, yes.
Okay.
Very nice, only 6 lines, 7 lines.
Okay. Since the last meeting, we had a public hearing in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission that took place January 9th. That public hearing was open and closed. The Planning and Zoning Commission, however, elected to continue the discussion until January 30th. They was felt that it needed more time to digest the information and to think about the comments that were given during the public hearing. We expect, though, that they'll have a recommendation coming out of that January 30th meeting. That recommendation then will be taken and combined with the other materials and submitted to the Assembly for introduction on February 14th. if it doesn't happen on the 14th, it would be introduced on the 28th. It's a matter of whether or not it gets through the process in time. In either case, we'll still maintain our schedule as we had distributed last time, I think. After the introduction, of course, the Assembly will have to hold a public hearing. Expect that will happen on March 13th. I think that's the next available Assembly meeting where we could hold the public hearing. Hopefully, we can do that in one meeting. We never know unless there might be a large number of people who want to testify. In either case, I think we'll be able to wrap that up in March, I'm hoping. We would like to request, if it's the desire of the Assembly, to have a work session with the Assembly on this material so that it's a lot to digest in just one public hearing. So if they're amenable to that and the administration would coordinate that, then we could hold that prior to the public hearing in March and discuss anything they have to bring up. So in any case, I guess to summarize, it just looks like we're on schedule. Things are going as we hoped. We will probably expect to keep to the schedule where this policy committee will make a final approval in April, the April meeting. Then we can submit it to FHWA and FTA for approval, which will meet our deadline, our drop dead deadline of June 30th, 2012.
Thank you, Mr. Spring. Any comments?
Just a couple quick questions.
Sure. It's fine.
At the January 30 planning and zoning meeting, do you expect them to open for additional comment or just to do further deliberations?
Through the chair, my understanding is that they may elect to reopen it for additional testimony. That'll be up to the commission.
Okay. And you're shooting for a February 14 introduction of this draft for consideration by the Assembly?
Yes.
Would it be possible to do the public hearing on either February 28 or March 27? And I ask only because the 13th is during spring break and may affect public participation.
In fact, I don't think I'll be here during the spring break, actually, not to mention that.
I know I won't, but not because I'm going to be playing, I'll be working, but.
My wife's a teacher, so we take vacation then,
Yeah.
so, and it's also Iditarod. 27th would meet our schedule.
Okay.
There'd be no problem with the 28th as a public hearing date. In fact, I anticipate that may actually be what happens.
March 27 works.
We could think about, we could schedule that and put that, revise our schedule to reflect that.
I put that forward for consideration. I know we're worried about timing, but I'm also worried about giving access to people.
John?
February, not March.
Hi, it's Bob and Brian with BGES.
On February 28th.
February.
February 20th.
Oh, you said, oh, no, March.
Either February 28 or March 27.
March 27th or February. February 28th would be, means that we would absolutely have to have it introduced by the 14th.
Right.
Which means we have to have it in what we call the pay system by February 2nd.
Right.
So if we don't make, I'm not sure we can make that date. There's a couple of reasons why I'm wondering if we can.
Okay.
One of which is if the Planning and Zoning Commission actually finishes their work and I get a resolution from them in order
Yep.
in time, it may be difficult. So I don't anticipate that we'll be able to make the 28th public hearing. I'd rather just assume that we could schedule it for March 27th.
So introduce on the 28th, public hearing.
Probably introduced on the 28th.
And then, not to speak for the Assembly, but I'm assuming your colleagues might want a work session.
I think that's a very good idea.
Would you coordinate that with Barbara then?
Yeah, I'll let them know. So we'll shoot for all those who are wondering, that would be the preceding Friday,
24th?
which is the 24th. I think.
Hi, Christine.
Yeah, I'm here.
We're involved in another conference here, too.
Yes,
Oh, we are? With who?
This is the AMATS Policy Committee meeting. We're gonna
I'm-
we're gonna try and find.
I'm sorry.
we're gonna,
We'll go on another number, you guys. Sorry.
Thank you.
thank you.
So Friday, March 23 would be the most likely work session date. I'll get that confirmed with the clerk's office.
Okay. Guys got it all?
I think we know what we're doing.
Sounds good. Mr. Sullivan, any further questions or comments?
Nope.
Ms. Edwards?
No, thank you.
Okay, I'll summarize John, say that, I appreciate your willingness to work with the Assembly and the Mayor's office to schedule this and try to increase our public involvement, but I'm also concerned about the schedule. You knew I was going to say it, but I'll say it. We want to make sure we get done in a timely fashion, and there's going to be, we've had weeks already, and we'll have weeks more in front of us for public to comment on this thing through a variety of means. It's not just they have to be in physical attendance. So please keep in mind that we want to make our deadline. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and I guess, I didn't mean to preclude the audience. Is there anybody from the audience here that wishes to testify about what Mr. Spring has said, or perhaps we can indulge you with a question if it's brief? Resounding silence. Okay, let's move along then. Mr. Lyons, who is going to be talking about our tip mod number 4?
I'll start real quickly, and then Mr. Wilbur will give you some more clarification. We're in the process, as you know, of doing a major amendment number 3 to our tip. This thing that we're dealing with here, the project that we're dealing with was part of that. But in the interest of time, we changed into an administrative modification. Administrative modifications don't require a public hearing process, and they don't, in this case, we can add projects to via an administrative modification as long as they don't require a conformity analysis, and this particular project does not. So that's why we can pull this thing across and do it as an administrative modification. So I'll let Mr. Wilbur give you the details on what the project is.
Okay, let me ask you one clarification here.
Sure.
We've got before us table 8. I assume this is the mod you're referring to.
This is the modification we're
And I'm
referring
seeing
to.
that there's quite a bit of strikeout in here in black, and I see on the back page there's one project in red.
Right.
What is the distinction between
Okay.
those two?
What I
schemes?
did is I took this table out of the major amendment number 3, and I left in red the one project that we're dealing with in this administrative modification. So the only change that you're going to vote on today is the one project in red.
Okay.
Everything else, if there are changes from the previous version of the tip, the major amendment number 2, they are being dealt with in major amendment number 3. So the only thing you're voting on is the one project in red.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
So, Mr. Chairman, maybe a little background on this one here. The municipality and public transportation department, we applied for a competitive grant that we became aware of last fall. We were awarded a $2.5 million grant to do a facility repair on our maintenance facility for our transit. It's a 90,000 square foot building that we are going to repair the roof on. As Mr. Lyon mentioned, the process that we started with to include it as major amendment, we were on the right path. The policy committee's action to include this in the tip through an administrative modification would allow us then to work with the state to get it incorporated into the STIP. We can inform Federal Transit Administration to release those funds, and in the process that we have to do on our side, which is to put the appropriation before the Assembly, put a document out to bid. The goal is to start this project as soon as possible. Currently, the project estimation, it's going to take 5 to 6 months to complete. So that's why the urgency of requesting the policy committee to administrative modification. The match that's being required is being provided by the municipality. So if you have any questions on the details, the timing, the purpose, I'd be glad to address those.
Okay, Mr. Flynn, comments, questions? Mayor?
And then is the match 50/50 match?
It's an 80-20. So this is the 80.
State, excellent.
Lance, is this additional money to the program, or is this coming out of another category within the program?
Additional money to the program.
Okay, standalone grant. And your idea is to get it under construction this summer?
Yes.
Is that the emergency?
Yes.
Okay. Motion.
Move approval of modification 4.
Thank you. Second. Second. Do we have anybody from the audience that would like to comment on the motion before us now? Anybody in the committee?
Urge approval.
Okay. Any objections to the motion before us? Seeing none, it's passed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that our business
That's it for
item?
business items. I'm going to pass around that signature sheet if we could get to that, Tony.
Okay.
And roll. And we're done with business items.
So now we have primarily informational.
Mr. Chairman, before Mr. Strain leaves, I just wanted to offer, I sent an email to the clerk about the work session on the 23rd. However, as I was typing it, it occurred to me that the chair has been intensely interested in the blending of the Chugach Eagle River and Anchorage Bowl transportation plans. And so I offered her that perhaps March 9 might be preferable so she would have more time for follow-on questions. I don't know what she'll pick, but I wanted to share that with you as
Okay,
perspective.
all right, thank you. All right, let's move forward with our first informational item then.
Okay.
Do we have these in any particular order, or are we just going to hit them from the
Take
top?
them in the order from the top there.
Okay,
So
great.
we'll start with our senior transportation planner, Erica McConnell, who is working on our OSNHP update.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Erica McConnell. I've been in the Transportation Planning Department for about 9 months and took over this project, the Official Streets and Highways Plan revision, at the time that I came on board. You do have a packet in front of you. The packet contains the public hearing draft of the Official Streets and Highways Plan, a list of classification changes that were proposed between the existing 2005 OSNHP and the public hearing draft, a comment matrix that responds to all the public comments we received before the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing, which was at the end of October, and a list of the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommended amendments. So those are the 4 documents that are in your packet. The Official Streets and Highways Plan is an element of the comprehensive plan, and its main purpose is to set the functional classification of all the streets in the municipality. It describes their general functions and characteristics with a special attention to freeways, expressways, arterials, and collectors. And kind of by default, anything that isn't classified in one of those categories is then a local street. The major changes between the 2005 OSNHP and the public hearing draft in front of you are 3. The first is the inclusion of the street typologies. You may be familiar with the street typologies from the existing LRTP. They were created to try to address issues that go beyond just what's the traffic flow on the street to talk about things like what's the land use along the street, to try to do more to tie land use and transportation together. So we brought the street typologies from the LRTP into the Official Streets and Highways Plan. And one of the projects that you might have noticed in the recently adopted work plan for AMATS is that in 2013, we'll be doing a project to apply the street typologies to the collectors and arterials within the municipality. The second major change is in the study area section. We removed studies that had been completed from the existing OSNHP, and we added at least 1 new study into this particular OSNHP to address an issue in Chugach Eagle River. So that is something that has changed. And then the third major change is has to do with the maps and the tables. We tried to bring consistency between those two. There were definitely some discrepancies in the existing OSNHP where you had things on the map that weren't on the tables and vice versa. So we tried to make those consistent. There are local streets that were upgraded to collector status. There are collectors that were added from the Hillside District Plan, and then streets projects that were added from the LRTP. So those are the 3 major changes between our current plan and this proposed plan. This public hearing draft is not consistent with the draft MTP because we don't want to presuppose what's going to be approved in the final MTP. So there will need to be some minor amendments to this OSNHP after the MTP is adopted to bring a couple of projects into the OSNHP that aren't in today's LRTP or OSNHP. And the schedule going forward is this will get into PACE by the 2nd and thus be on the Assembly's agenda for introduction on February 14th. And presumably they'll set a hearing date for February 28th, but if not that date, then I'm sure soon after. Are there any questions?
sure there's going to be quite a few. I'll start with, to my left, Mr. Flynn.
Could you speak to, you mentioned one study area was added, which one was that?
It's study area H. There's a situation in North Birchwood where there's a one-lane bridge crossing over Peters Creek. It's the Starner Street Bridge, and it connects Aurora Borealis Street with Starner Street. And the bridge, it's a collector, yet it's a one-lane bridge. And so the current OSNHP proposes a different collector to cross Peters Creek, but Peters Creek has quite a wide floodplain in that area, and there's differing opinions among the Subversa board and members of the Chicagee River community about where the appropriate crossing of Peters Creek is. At the same time, there's no community pressure to actually deal with the situation. They're comfortable with the bridge, they're comfortable with Aurora Borealis, which actually isn't in public right-of-way at the moment. So they couldn't agree on whether they thought this other collector that's in our current OSNHP should be included or not. So rather than, because there was no pressure to resolve this, what we did is we removed the collector designations from Aurora Borealis and the bridge and a couple of the surrounding streets and made it a study area. So at the time that the community says, okay, we're ready to get this issue resolved, we're ready to talk about rebuilding the bridge, about finding the appropriate right-of-way for streets in that area, then there can be a particular study area that will look at the creek and determine, and the patterns, the street patterns in the neighborhood, and determine where is the appropriate crossing of Peters Creek for a collector.
So we're designating a study area or executing?
We're designating a study, we're recommending that in the future a study be done in this area.
At some point, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then, could you just, do you have any specific examples of where you had inconsistencies between the maps and the tables?
If you look on and I'm just talking about the current OSNHP, not the,
Not the map in front of us,
because I
because this one's
fixed them.
perfect, right? Yeah.
well, I don't know if I would say that. But if you look
Close to it as you get.
on the document that I gave you that says proposed classification changes from the 2005 OSNHP to the 2011 OSNHP,
Yep.
there's a whole section, discrepancies between map and table in the 2000 OSNHP that are fixed. It's about the fourth section down, and you can see the list of things where, you know, the map says one thing and the table says something else, and how we resolve the conflict.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
On collector streets, the neighborhood collectors, like the 1C, is that a new designation, or has that always been?
There are the same four designations that there've always been, 1A, 1B, and 1C. In the 2000, at the adoption of the 2005 OSNHP, they changed the name from residential collector to neighborhood collector. So you
Did the
still,
widths change at all, or, I mean,
No.
I see that's down to 60 feet.
it's always been that way.
Okay, good, yeah. We also had a lot of concern about McRae, 35th, and that whole, it's a connector rather than a collector, and so I think that classification probably fits, but, so, okay, good, yeah, just, good to see that designation. And did that designation change on that road at all, or is that?
On McRae,
Yeah, where it connects between Spenard Road and Wisconsin. It's kind of a cut-through street, but,
right.
but at the same time, it's got that almost country lane kind of look to it, so
This will use that for
I do every day. I'm guilty.
I think McRae has remained a 1C neighborhood collector the same as it is today.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Edwards?
No, I think I'm okay, thank you.
I guess I've got a area of concern. I'm curious, how do we resolve the conflict between state-owned routes and municipally owned routes in these functional classifications, and how does the street typology apply to those? It's kind of a big, broad
Sure.
question.
As you know, the state has functional classifications and the municipality has functional classifications. And as I spoke with planners and engineers at the state, the way they explained it to me is that the state system is set up to apply the same classifications everywhere in the state. So the way they looked at the roads and designated them, it had to fit all of the communities. It wasn't just set up for one community. So their classification scheme is different. They have 9 different classification types, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have like 11, I think. And so they don't match up perfectly. And what I was told happens is that if the state is constructing or reconstructing a road where the state is going to retain ownership and maintenance responsibilities, that they, start with the state classification and the design that classification would point them to. And they look at what the municipal classification is, and they look at that design, and then they look at the actual situation on the ground, and they adjust the design as necessary. But that basically they go forward with the design that they feel is necessary. It's a slightly different situation if where the state is building, I'm told, where the state is building a road and it's going to be transferred to the municipality, and then they'll kind of give more weight to the municipal classification.
So is it expressly stated in here that that's how it works, is that a state facility within this boundary district is still within the state's discretion area for functional classification, or is that just a kind of an operational procedure that has historically happened despite what it may or may not say in here?
The latter. I mean, what we say about this functional classifications in here is on the bottom of page 2, where we note that the state of Alaska applies functional classifications to public streets in order to guide roadway design, plan access management, and help evaluate the STIP funding. It's ideal that the two should mesh. However, some differences do exist between the state classifications and the official streets and highways plan due to differences in the functional classification categories and between the goals of the municipality and the Department of Transportation. But so it doesn't address in this plan how that plays out once you get into the design phase.
Okay, well, I guess we'll take that under advisement and consider our comments thereof. And then I guess the last question I have is this document is blessed by the Assembly. Is that the approving body of this document ultimately?
Yes.
As opposed to AMATS or any other joint city-state? It's purely a
That's correct.
city-produced document? For that clarification. Okay, Mr. Michaelis, you've joined us in the mayor's stead. Do you have any questions you'd like to add?
No, not in this forum, because it goes a little bit further beyond this forum, and that has to do with some of the discrepancies on state facilities within the municipal bounds. We've had those discussions before about amenities and those type of things, but that's a little different subject. This is purely just classification on the road and how you work those out when there's a difference.
Okay. All right, so does anybody from the assembled audience care to make any comments briefly? Once again, you've satisfied them perfectly, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want me? No, he tells him.
ITS.
Okay.
So I think Ms. Underwood, Vivian Underwood, our other senior transportation planner, will give us a start here, and she'll introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Vivian Underwood. Among other things, I serve as the ITS coordinator effectively for transportation planning. We have a special guest speaker for you today, and I'll introduce him in just a moment, but I have to tell you 2 quick things. This year, we'll be updating the ITS architecture, and ITS, as you may know, is using advanced technology to improve the service transportation system in an integrated manner. And the architecture is merely a it's a planning tool and a project implementation tool. So you have a list of projects that are currently in the current ITS architecture. Most of those are either have been completed or they are in progress right now, and so we do need to update the plan. The second thing I need to tell you is that we will be, this quarter, we'll be forming a new ITS advisory subcommittee to AMATS, and they will serve as the technical team with the ITS architecture update. Our guest speaker today is Dr. Jeffrey Miller with UAA. He is professor in the Computer Systems Engineering Department in the School of Engineering. The current Metropolitan Transportation Plan draft has some recommendations under congestion management for real-time traffic monitoring. And Dr. Miller's presentation is exactly along those lines. He's been working with Teresa Brewer, who's also a staff member with AMATS, with the Freight Advisory Committee. Dr. Miller's on the Freight Advisory Committee, and he's also immediate past president of ITS Alaska, which is the state chapter of ITS America Society. So I won't take any more of his time. I'd like to turn this over to Dr. Miller.
Excuse me,
Oh, yes.
just one word before you. You triggered a couple of questions in my mind when you said we're updating the ITS infrastructure. My apologies, Mr. Miller, I'll give you a minute. What updates are we doing, and when are they mandated, and how, when you say we're updating our architecture, that has some ramifications to me that are a little concerning in that it's a pretty global world out there, and updating the architecture in one place has an impact on everything else. How often are we updating the architecture, and what are the magnitude of the update that you're proposing for this year?
Well, that's a good question. Federal regulations don't say how often it needs to be updated, only that it does need to be updated periodically. The horizon line is about 10 years. The current one was updated in 2004. But we do have a federal highway certification corrective action to do a maintenance plan that actually will spell out all of that information, who updates it, when, what elements are going to be updated. So there's a chapter in the there's a technical memorandum that says all the items that we would need to address when we get to it, but it's time for us to do that. So that's the first thing we need to do, is get that done, and the deadline is sometime this year.
Okay, would you anticipate this is more of a housekeeping thing or more of a structural change to how we're doing stuff?
No, this is going to be, we will have interviews with stakeholders, and we'll be updating. It's user needs driven, however. It's not pie in the sky. The current ITS architecture, I think, is a testament to the fact that this is not pie in the sky. We've done most of the things that are in there, and it's only based on what different departments actually believe that the municipality is going to do, and in coordination with the DOT. But it's try to give some new vision and some new energy also to the way we do business.
Okay, and that plan is part of our, what, is that a standalone plan, or is it part of some other AMATS approved document, or what? How does that plan
It's a
take effect?
standalone document. It is required it's required in federal planning regulations that we have an ITS architecture.
Okay.
So,
Will that eventually come to us for approval? Is kind of where it's going with that question.
absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Miller. Carry on.
All right, well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about some of the work that we're doing at the university and about intelligent transportation systems in general. So just a brief outline of what I'm going to be discussing, the current traffic assessment that we have in Anchorage, how I'm proposing that we enhance that with distributed traffic assessment, and this future project that we're working on at the university. So to start off, we've all seen some of the traffic assessment that we have. Video cameras, this was taken in Juneau, but we have some video cameras that monitor roadways in Anchorage as well. Loop detectors that we embed in different roadways have sensors for detecting vehicles and speeds that go across them. We have the air tubes, which we use predominantly during summer because of snowplows being able to take them right off of the road for detecting vehicle counts. We have driver call-in and police who will facilitate the driver call-ins. Hopefully this isn't how the drivers do call in. We also have people who will monitor the counts on the roads, and sometimes during summer you'll see people who are just manually counting number of vehicles across an intersection. The DOT has started installing some of the road weather information systems along highways. This one is the one that's down in Bird Point along the Seward Highway for detecting speed. It has a radar there, as well as having a weather station. And to enhance all of these discrete measures of gathering traffic data, we can now use intelligent transportation systems and install devices inside of the vehicles and gather data from a continuous flow of traffic rather than gathering them specifically at those locations. So with a device that's traveling along with the vehicle, it can transmit speed and direction and location in a continuous manner rather than just having it at a specific location where we have devices installed. This can be done through devices that are installed physically inside of a vehicle, or it could be done through cell phones or other devices that travel with the driver in the vehicle.
Didn't the Supreme Court just say you couldn't do that?
What did you say?
Didn't the Supreme Court just say you couldn't do that?
No.
Police?
The ruling said that the Supreme Court ruling said that law enforcement wasn't able to track vehicles without having a court order for doing so.
Okay, so you have a court order, okay.
We'll get to the privacy in the second hearing. So here's the architecture of the system. The vehicles have devices that have GPS receivers in them, so they communicate with GPS satellites to figure out the location of the vehicle. They communicate with some roadway infrastructure, whether this is over Wi-Fi or whether a cellular network, or whether some sort of a vehicular wireless network. Back to a central infrastructure computer farm. This is hosted at the university. I have a set of computers, database servers, and servers receiving the data from the vehicles. It's all redundant, it's backed up, and we host it currently at the university. They communicate with a database server, which also is redundant in case there's any disk failures, that we don't lose all of our data. The roadway infrastructure that I've chosen to use currently is the cellular infrastructure. I've fortunately been able to strike a deal with GCI to be somewhat of a sponsor of the project, who's giving us free data access on their network for our devices. This is what the tracking device looks like. It's very small. It plugs in through the vehicle's onboard diagnostics port, which is the one that looks like this. This is the same port that a mechanic would use if he's going to diagnose a problem on your vehicle. All cars from 1998 and newer were regulated by the federal government that they had to have an OBD port on them for diagnostic purposes. We also have applications that run on cell phones, specifically an iPhone app, an Android app, and a BlackBerry app, which does essentially the same thing. The difference is that instead of it being able to tap into all of the different parameters that we have available to us from the car's computer system, the ECU on the vehicle, these are only able to transmit the location and possibly the speed of the device. It's not actually attached to the vehicle itself. So it posed an interesting problem to see, especially on areas where we had a lot of traffic, that someone walking along the side of the road could transmit a speed faster than what the flow of traffic is on the road. There obviously are privacy concerns being tracked, and a lot of the people who currently have the device in their vehicle have expressed these concerns and asked questions about this. The data transmitted does have a unique identifier associated with it. It has to have some sort of a unique identifier, so I know that it's the same vehicle transmitting at location A as transmitting at location B, and I can follow the trajectory of that vehicle. So it has to have some sort of an identification associated with it. It's not associated with the vehicle. It's definitely not associated with the driver. So if someone were to ask me if I could tell them where a specific vehicle was located, the answer is no, I cannot. I can tell you where this device was located. We also are only interested in the main arterials and not residential streets. We don't have the penetration rate high enough so that we can say that the average flow of traffic on one of the residential streets is X miles per hour. We currently have them installed in 65 vehicles during rush hour along the main arterials. We do pretty well about being able to assess what the flow of traffic is on those sections, though. The third point is that the location of the device is never exposed to the public. The website, which I'll show you a screenshot of in a second, only shows an aggregation of the data. It doesn't actually show the location of an individual device on the map. And so even if it was, even if someone knew that a vehicle had the device in it, they still wouldn't be able to know exactly where that vehicle was. On the back end, on the server, we do know where that specific device was. We just don't expose this data to the public. So we currently have 65 vehicles being tracked and spread among volunteers, the BPSI share ride vans, and some delivery freight vehicles. We have a few vehicles that are also using smartphones, the iPhone, BlackBerry, and Android apps. And now, when I looked this up, originally this was over a 16-month period. We had 1.4 million data points from the 65 vehicles. When I just looked this up before coming to the meeting today, we've now cracked the 2 million point mark. Here's a screenshot of what's available. It's on a website called alaskatraffic.net. And we show what the flow of traffic is as far as the average speed on these different roadways. If we don't have any data for a specific roadway, as you see here, even though it is considered one of the arterials, we just don't display a color on it. If we have data for it, then we'll display a color. The colors correspond to the average speed of that section of the roadway. If the average speed is higher than 75% of the posted speed limit, we post it as a green line. If it's between 50 and 75% of the posted speed limit, we make it yellow. 25% to 50% would be orange, and then if the average speed is less than 25% of the speed limit, we would have a red line, as you see here. If you put your mouse over the top of one of the lines, it's going to tell you some information about that specific section of roadway. It'll tell you what the distance is of it, what the current speed is on it, what time that speed was reported, how long it's going to take you to traverse it at that speed, what the speed limit of that roadway is, and how long it would take you to traverse that section of the roadway at speed limit. The data that we show right now is currently shown for 30 minutes. If no other vehicle drives along a section of roadway within 30 minutes, we take that edge down so you wouldn't see a color lit up. This was to try to minimize the amount of stale data that we're showing. We're trying to figure out how to assess whether this is accurate. So a 30-minute period, obviously traffic can change in the blink of an eye, and that congestion could occur if an accident happens very quickly. And with a low penetration rate of only 65 vehicles, we had to balance being able to show some data as opposed to how much of the data is stale. So as the number of vehicles that we have increases, we can hopefully then decrease the amount of time that we keep data on there. The project is free and open source. It's being used by other universities in the world as well as in conjunction with departments of transportation. I'm happy to say that we have recently, over the past, I think, 2 months or 3 months ago, we finally hit our 6th continent. So there are people or universities in 6 of the 7 continents of the world who are using this application for their own purposes or instructional purposes, training purposes, and so on. We aggregate the data that we have over periods of time. There have been some requests from the city already that we've aggregated some of our data to show what was the average speed on Tudor between certain intersections over a 3-hour period. And I've provided this data, and the points that we get are somewhere in the order of, well, we have 20,000 data points, so we just average them and come up with a number of this was the average speed between 7 and 9 a.m. On that section of roadway in winter months or things like that. So we have a lot of data available to us that we can aggregate, even with such a low number of vehicles that have the device installed in them. So our future projects that we're working on, recently been able to secure contracts with 4 of the freight companies that we have in town that they're willing to allow us to install devices in some of their vehicles so that we can track the paths that the freight vehicles take and see where we could improve as far as from what the Freight Advisory Committee of AMATS does, as well as helping out the drivers to circumvent locations of congestion. We have aggregated data that we have into a single interface, which is nice. I've talked with Jill Sullivan and Jack Stickle from the Alaska DOT working in 511. They want to try to incorporate some of our data into the 511 system as well. We have done some studies and published some papers on determining fastest paths in real time so that we could be able to allow drivers to say what's the fastest way for me to get from where I am to where I want to go, rather than just looking it up online on Google or MapQuest and seeing what the shortest way to get from one location to another is. We've tried to tackle some of the academic problems as well, such as the dynamic traveling salesman problem. This one would be key for delivery companies where they have a set of 10 deliveries that they need to make in a day. What's going to be the fastest way for them to make those deliveries when we have real-time changing conditions of traffic? How do we reduce the cost for the devices? Whether we're using Wi-Fi or other wireless transmission, GCI has been very generous, and this is one way that we can allow our project to continue going into the future without having to continue requesting additional funding for the devices. Originally, when we put these devices together using the SIM cards, we were having to pay an annual service fee for the data plan that we had on each one of the devices. So I was really happy with GCI's willingness to do this. We have a specific frequency which has been allocated by the FCC for vehicular communications in the 5.9 gigahertz band, 75 megahertz, and this is specifically for vehicle-to-vehicle and vehicle-to-infrastructure communication. There are some standards out there, 802.11p, Most of us may be familiar with the 802.11 standards of using 802.11b, G, or N for our Wi-Fi communication. Well, there's another standard, 802.11p, specifically for vehicular communication over a similar frequency. One of our current projects that we're working on is vehicle slippage. And with the vehicle slippage project, we have these same devices, and they're able to grab information about when a vehicle is slipping. So this would be when the analog braking system is kicking in as a vehicle is coming to a stop. During the winter months when we have ice on the roads, that would mean that the vehicle is slipping. So these devices are able to detect when the vehicle is slipping, and we're retrieving that data, and we're going to be trying to aggregate that and to be able to display maybe something like this. This is conceptual, to display a blue dot to show that this is a slippery section of the roadway. Hopefully, we're also going to be able to communicate this data with the DOT and with the municipality and see if they have a need for using this data, if maybe we're giving them information that they can find handy for dispatching sand trucks or snow plows to certain areas as well. Second, the tracking of snow plows. This is an idea that we've had for a number of years. Just recently, the City of New York as well as the City of Chicago have both released similar applications like this, where you can go online. The City of Chicago has it, where you can go online if there is a storm, and they'll show you the exact roadways that have already been plowed by snow plows. And my take on this is that if we're able to track the snow plows, we can then show the lines similar to what I've shown you before of how long it's been since that specific roadway has been plowed. Also, perhaps tying in with the National Weather Service to show how much snowfall we've had over a certain amount of time. So then you can see, well, we've had an inch of snowfall in the last hour, and this road was plowed 60 minutes ago. So that means I can assume how much snow is actually on that section of roadway. Any questions?
Well, I'm sure there'll be a few. Mr. Flynn, would you care to start us off?
I'd love to. First one involves the last, just serendipitous. Last month I heard from a neighbor who was trying to get the city to tell him when they'd be plowing his street so he could make sure the cars were moved off, sort of help. Is there an application where we could use the data from street maintenance and plug it into this application somehow?
Well, from what I've gathered, the routes that the snow plows take for plowing the roads typically occurs in the same order every time. Once we start getting this data, we can probably have some prediction algorithms of when plows are going to reach certain roadways.
It's not quite correct.
Yeah, it's actually flip-flops.
Yeah, they rotate so that no one neighborhood or area is the last one to be plowed out each time.
But what I'm wondering is if they give you their plan at, they usually go out at night. If they give you their plan at 6 o'clock in the evening, there's a way to get that data to you that you could then plug into the app that you push out.
Absolutely. To clarify, I guess I was thinking of that the main roadways are the ones that will get plowed before they move to the residential roadways. And
That's correct.
Yeah.
Consistent.
Yeah. Okay, so we should talk about that. How much do those transmitters cost? The ones that plug into the
ones that we purchased, so we purchased them from a company in Florida. The ones that I showed you here, they were $249 a piece. The ones that we've created ourselves, we were able to create them individually for $200 a piece.
You built them here?
What's that?
You built them here?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Yeah, we have a team, two other professors and some students at the university that actually built the same devices that I showed you there, except with additional functionality.
Student labor is cheap, it's good. And then is the number of transmitters you have out on the streets a function of limited willingness to take them, or limited hardware?
Neither. It was limited budget.
With budget, right?
Because the 65 vehicles were purchased as part of a grant that I had written, that I had funded by the Alaska University Transportation Center, which gets money from the US DOT. And so I was able to purchase 65 devices. So additional funding would allow additional vehicles to have them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all the questions I had.
Thank you. Mr. Candleson? Edwards?
The only question I had is, you have 65 vehicles. I'm just curious, what if you had more funding, what would be the sort of the scale that you'd be looking for as far as having maybe a more robust information coming in? I mean, what could your system handle? Do you have sort of a goal that you're looking towards?
But we're well below what the system is currently able to handle. What we would like to be able to have long-term is as many vehicles as possible. The more vehicles we have, the more accurate the data is that we're able to display. So I don't have an exact number of what my target is, because as soon as we reach a specific point, we're going to want to continue getting more to have more accurate data.
But your current system would at some point have some threshold above which you probably couldn't, you would have more data coming in that you could accept into your system.
Well, so adding additional hardware, additional servers, additional processing power, of course, we will reach that at some point. I don't know where that's going to be right now. We have, I think I have 6 servers that are running the application right now, and as I said, it's not even a blip on the processing power.
So I had a couple of questions. You said you got funding through the university system. What was your grant and duration, and what's your plan for the future?
So I've received 3 grants on this project from the, it's outside of the university system, the Alaska University Transportation Center. We have UTCs around the country who are funded from the US DOT. So I've had 3 different grants on this. Each one of them were for approximately $100,000. And what was your next question?
The question is, what was the goal of the program, and where are you trying to go in the future with it?
So one of the grants was just to do an assessment of the current congestion levels within the city of Anchorage. The second one was detecting vehicle slippage. And the third one was how we were going to continue to have the project go into perpetuity without having ongoing service costs using a cellular network.
So did you develop the actual software that goes, that's developed, that's responsible for this? I mean, it seems like the kind of thing that you could probably find in other metropolitan areas where they might have some kind of real life tracking systems in place. Is ours different than that in a meaningful way?
Well, the software was completely created by myself and the team at the university. Now that we have our own devices also, that's completely created by us as well. So this is completely a system, and it's open. It's not a closed system, which a lot of them are, that don't allow you to extend on the capabilities of it. So we have complete control over expanding this. We can grab any additional data we want from the vehicle's computer system. We can attach these to snow plows. We can put them on. We have some already on buses, not our own, but I know the city does have their buses tracked, and it would be nice to have that data tied into the system as well.
I've lost my train of thought on this. Well, it happens. Senior moment. Okay, thank you for your presentation. Anyone from the crowd have a comment or a question?
You talked about your duration of funding. When does your current funding expire or something?
So the projects that I have right now go through December of 2013. We do have some proposals out with the National Science Foundation and the US DOT to continue these on. I've also been in talk with people at the Alaska DOT and the city of Anchorage to hopefully try to continue the project. The one positive thing that I have is with GCI providing this to us, we can continue tracking the vehicles even after the project is done. The hardware belongs to us, and the cellular network has the free data plans now.
Could you state your name for the record, please, sir?
Yes,
Question?
I'm Chuck Kopp, Chief of Staff to Senator Fred Nice.
Thank you.
That did trigger my recollection. Thank you for that question. The key word was duration. Yeah, I was going to ask you, how long have you been doing this? I mean, so how much, you said you have approximately 16 months, is that right, worth of data duration at this point? Or
I started the project up here in summer of 2009. So the 16 months was from that point on.
Okay, all right. So you got another year on top of that then?
Yes.
Okay, so you got almost 3 years of data. And so do you look at this, and maybe I guess it appears to me that it's got both short-term and long-term implications, in that I'm assuming that this data is retained in a way that we will have at some point, say, a 5-year history of traffic movement across Northern Lights Boulevard in this town. We'll be able to parse that data in a lot of different ways. Is that true?
Absolutely.
So we've got the real-time reporting, which is certainly valuable for people that are driving, but from a design and and operation standpoint, going back and looking at that data collectively will point us, I think, to some developing trends in our network that we can perhaps use to better economize our decisions.
Right. And that was part of the purpose as well, was to gather to keep the historical data, which was where I had mentioned that we're somewhere over 2 million data points just within the city of Anchorage that we've gathered over that 2.5-year time period.
Great, okay, thank you. Oh,
I'm sorry, just one last question occurred to me. The vehicles you have in the program, are they all just average, individual vehicles, or are they from fleets or other types of vehicles?
So it was split among volunteers, the VPSI share ride vans, and some of the freight vehicles.
Okay, so the volunteers then are just general public kinds of folks running, just
I
normal
tried to
people on the
choose
roads?
volunteers strategically so that I would get data along the Glen Highway and the Seward Highway. So I tried to choose people commuting from Eagle River or the Valley for the volunteers, crosstown, or from the south, so that we could get data along the main highways.
I'm giving him a data point from down Minnesota, down Tuner. So.
Are you a tracker?
I am a tracker.
But you can't tell. One final question. Those diagnostic systems could give you air quality data too, correct?
Yes. We are actually able to pull somewhere over 300 different data points from the OBD port. So depending on the application can depend on what we can pull and then transmit back to our server.
Working your way right back into that privacy issue, aren't you?
I mean, just for your air quality monitoring program.
The thought I had is that often in doing air quality modeling, you need to determine types of trips, home-based trips, work-based trips, trips in between, and a lot of times they use trip diaries for that, and this seemed very intriguing to me in the concept of maybe being able to, just by tracking vehicles, you could get some of that information without having to actually have people entering things into logs and things like that are a little bit different way of doing it.
Didn't mean to find another funding source for you there, but I may appreciate it.
That's why I asked the question about what types of folks are in it as well, just because I was thinking about that sort of data collection that we do every once in a while.
Well, clearly it could be used to validate your modeling too, which is the underpinning of a lot of our long-range plans. So I mean, it's got a lot of implications to it. So interesting stuff. Thank you, Dr. Miller.
Thank you.
Next.
That's your guy. Jerry. Yeah,
You got a remote control for your,
Can you do a little better than that?
well, you're going to exhaust your finger, I think.
If you could just,
Welsh.
My name is, if you could just start that. My name is Jerry Welsh. I work for the Alaska DOT in the preliminary design and environmental section. And I and some of my people performed a study on the Glen Highway interchanges, and I've been asked to brief you on that. I'll talk about the origins of the study and some of our objectives. I'll talk about some of the problems we looked at, and then I'll try to convey some of the conclusions and recommendations from the study. This study originated, it's in response to a legislative request to solve traffic problems on two of the interchanges. If you click Highland Road interchange, click again, and the Artillery Road interchange. The Highland Road interchange provides access to the Eagle River Loop, and Artillery accesses the Central Business District. Could you click? Areas of concern, the first one that pops up is the fact that traffic volumes on the Glen Highway are predicted to double by the year 2035, and that's kind of pivotal to the whole discussion. You can click. Long queues in the southbound on-ramps during the morning peak are of primary interest. They're the source of most of our complaints that we get at the department. Congestion, slowdown, long delays, occasional gridlock conditions on the highway and on these interchanges, both during the morning and the PM peak hours. Our drivers are delayed, they're frustrated, and we, of course, are concerned about safety. Study's objectives. Well, we wanted to document the existing conditions of each movement on each interchange. We analyzed actual current data and future predicted data in the turning movements during the peak hours. Next. We identified the operational problems through observation and analysis. Next. We looked at the effects on the interchanges of the predicted growth in traffic. Next. And we developed a range of alternatives. In the study, we also brought together some previously thought of ideas as this problem has been going on for some time. The complaints are not new to us. And then we developed cost estimates for each of the alternatives so that there could be a comparison of different solutions, the costs and the impacts, and also so maybe there could be there'd be some use in developing or programming a real project. I'm going to be using a term, level of service. Many here are probably familiar with it, but this is a way to rate roadway and intersection performance. It's based in delay, how much delay is experienced by the motorist. It ranges from A down to F, A being a free flow of traffic, F being perhaps gridlock or a failure. I want to mention that it's important that I mention that level of service is an isolated analysis. It's not a system-wide modeling tool. It looks at individual segments or intersections, and it's possible for a minor movement, that is a movement at an intersection that has very few vehicles, to raise a failure flag. You can get a level of service F for a single vehicle with one person in it, and because we're talking about an interchange during peak hours, that's something to keep in mind, because I want to concentrate on the major movements for this discussion. Our study talks about all the movements and how they're affected, but I don't want to talk about the one guy who is waiting for a long queue to pass or waiting for the good graces of a motorist to allow him in. So I will concentrate not only on the major movements, I will concentrate on the merge, and I'll make that clear why I'm concentrating on merge level of service as opposed to intersection level of service as we go along here. I'll talk about current conditions first. Next. The Highland Road interchange, it's the first one you hit as you head north to Eagle River. Is a big source of complaint. There are two movements that the southbound motorist has to negotiate. He has an intersection at the top of the ramp, and he has the merge getting onto the highway. And as you can see here, our current 2010 is where I have data for. Our current levels of service there are really restricted by the merge rather than the intersection. So that's why I want to talk about merge levels of service here. The bottleneck here is on the merge, not on the at the intersection. Motorists who are queued onto the bridge feel a frustration that they would like to get onto the ramp and head into town. But if we were to somehow facilitate their getting onto the ramp, they would still be restricted there and would probably experience nearly identical delays. The next slide, please. The Artillery Road intersection is a bit more complex, but here, the fact that we have a level of service of A on the intersection because we have this jug handle ramp that allows a free flow of traffic onto the ramp, it still leads to a level of service D. So this is instructive in letting you know that we can solve the problem at the top of the ramp, but if the ramp is restricted, we have a problem still for motorists as far as delays go. At the lower part, I show the level of service B on the northbound off-ramp. And now level of service B is a good level of service. That's an acceptable level of service. We have functional problems there that are due to the complex intersection of Eagle River Road, VFW Road, Cross Drive from the north. We also have the on-ramp there, and that causes operational problems that are not strictly speaking related to the interchange. I'll talk about talk about a couple of solutions we looked at that are realistic, and I'll throw in some that are probably not so realistic. But they are food for thought. This concept would widen the existing southbound, this is at Highland Road. This concept would widen the existing southbound on-ramp to 2 lanes and run the merge out, lengthen the merge to near the truck scales, which are off of the slide up to the left there. This would immediately give a merge level of service improvement to level of service A. However, and it's a temporary relief. We predict that would fail level of service F by 2026, given the current growth rates. It would return to its level of service D sometime before 2026. I can't pinpoint that with the tools I have and in the scope of this study. However, that is a short-term relief solution. That would cost somewhere in the neighborhood of about $10 million. It's just the next slide, please. This concept would add a jug handle ramp, eliminate the current ramp, and be very similar to what exists currently at Artillery Road. The southbound off-ramp in the upper right would be moved outboard to eliminate the left turn conflict there. This would lengthen the merge also, but because of restrictions with the bridge on this particular alternative, the immediate level of service improvement for the merge would be to a level of service B. That would be back to failure by 2022, also a short-term relief. And it would cost somewhere between $10 and $15 million, depending upon the extent of the bridge modifications required.
Could you explain, you mean you have to lengthen the span of the bridge to get the new lane underneath it? Is that what you're trying to say?
How could it?
What's the bridge restriction that you're speaking to?
Well, there's a paved slope under the bridge.
So you have to,
you would have to
move the buttress back, or?
That's correct.
Okay, that's what, thank you.
This is a southbound flyover. The reason to develop an alternative of such great magnitude, and to explain, that's a very long bridge that takes the southbound movement completely over the interchange and puts it into the merge on the other side to head south, is because this is the only kind of treatment you can do to this interchange in order to eliminate all conflict. You can remove all left turn conflicts. All levels of service on the interchange are improved to a level of service A because you grade separate all the movements. And this is an alternative that would cost in the neighborhood of $40 million. Again, I talked about minor movements, and this is just something that would be overkill, to say the least. Moving up to the artillery interchange. This concept would replace the single southbound jug handle with a double jug handle and provide longer merges. The merge length here is restricted by the presence of a narrow bridge over Eagle River in the left-hand part of the slide. However, it would provide level of service A immediately if it were constructed today, but it's destined for failure in the year 2023, according to our analysis. That would cost somewhere around $10 million also. Next slide, please. This is obviously a more far-reaching alternative here, and this is an alternative that's developed to try to address some of the intersection problems on the lower part of that graphic. It would solve all the problems. It would also cost a lot of money, and somewhere in the order of $35 million. It's also something that is thrown out as a panacea. However, it's because it involves the intersection modifications. It's something that wouldn't be undertaken unless it were coordinated with the central business district studies that are ongoing and planned. But it shows you what we're up against, just trying to get rid of all of the conflicts on the interchange. it provides a similar level of service to the previous slide. In other words, we're talking about the merge for the southbound on, and we saw that just as well with this as we did with the previous slide at a cost of about almost 4 times as much. The next slide shows a similar, less costly, but it's another concept that we developed in trying to make sure that there was a way to help the interchange out by getting rid of the complicated confluence of so many movements at the top of the interchange on the northbound off-ramp. And this has a flyover similar to the previous one. Next slide, please. And click again, please. The MTP we were discussing earlier has 3 projects that are relevant to this study. There's a short-term project to add an additional lane between Highland and Artillery Roads to create 3 lanes in each direction in the short term. Let's see. Next. There's also a project listed to add a partial interchange at Farm Avenue. And there's a long-term project to add HOV lanes all the way between Boniface and Artillery. That would create 4 lanes in each direction in the long term. This slide is intended to show the degree to which the Glen Highway capacity is detrimental to the interchanges we're talking about. Where the 8-lane project in the long term constructed today, the levels of service on these interchanges would move to acceptable, and that acceptable rating would persist to the year 2033. To rephrase, anything we do to the interchanges could be accomplished with no interchange work, simply by adding capacity to the highway. And I think that's important to keep in mind as you consider the path forward. The same is true at the Artillery Road. That's if you were to just improve the highway to 8 lanes, as is in the NTP in the long term, you'd have a level of service B, which is very good, all the way up to 2033. Next slide, please. This is a concept of putting a half interchange at Farm Avenue. We developed this simply to develop a cost for it. We don't have, as part of this study, the modeling necessary to know if this would attract enough traffic or take pressure off the other 2 interchanges. However, we thought it was worth throwing in for consideration, at least for estimating. The bottom line is that there are no long-term improvements for Eagle River motorists that can be accomplished with work to the interchanges. There's some short-term relief. Without the added capacity to the Glen, we can't accommodate the increasing traffic entering the highway from Eagle River. Construction of additional lanes offers the only long-term solution to the problems we're seeing out there. Southbound the recommendations include southbound on-ramp extensions at both interchanges are the most cost-effective for interchange performance improvement. Those are the less expensive, modest improvements, though they do only provide short-term relief. The study goes on to recommend that additional modeling and analysis should be performed before the selection of a major interchange project to predict how well the Eagle River system will perform as a whole. The numbers will switch if there's adjacent work in the community going on. Additional modeling should be performed to determine if the new Farm Road interchange would be beneficial. And we go on to say that any interchange improvements, if any are made in the short term, they should accommodate any work proposed by the MTP expansion in the long term. There's also a recommendation that the pathway discontinuity in the area and the lack of well-developed park and ride facilities should be looked at as well. That's, any questions?
I'm sure there'll be a few. Mr. Flynn, let's start with you.
Well, has the Eagle River delegation seen this yet?
I can address that.
I thought you might.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Saw it 2 days ago. There was an email came out with this presentation on it, and I'm here today to give comments from the delegation.
Okay.
I presented this to the Technical Advisory Committee 2 weeks ago. I've made the report available to our AMATS planner in our planning section. And I posted it online. I'm revising some cost data right now. I've also come into some more recent traffic data that I was going to assimilate into the project, but it's available on the state website.
And help me remember, what's our rough per mile estimate on adding lanes to the Glen? Do you remember?
Well, per mile estimate, I can't give you that. I can, because I don't have it.
Okay.
But it's a lot.
Yeah.
I can get you that information.
That's all right. I'm sure Mark can get it for you too.
It's probably in his book.
Probably is if I look closely enough.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna say it.
I'll work on that and see the floor for a little bit here.
Okay. Mr. Kelson?
Just interested to hear from Eagle River.
Yeah, we're all waiting. Ms. Edwards, anything?
No.
I want to, Jerry, can you clarify the scope of this document that you prepared and really what it's meant to be used for? I mean, there's quite often concern that, something like this comes out and people think that you cooked the omelet or that, that it's already done. Can you explain what this really is and where it is in the project development process?
First and foremost, when I was asked to put this together, I knew of several solutions that had been discussed in our traffic section. So the first thing we did with the study was put together all previous ideas that had any merit, and we updated those ideas. The other purpose of the study is to formalize the reports of a problem into an identification numerically of a problem. To go out, we counted cars, we observed the traffic backups, we did traffic projections, we pulled from the available traffic models the information, and then we did what's a synchro analysis on each of the movements on the interchanges so that we could assign a letter grade to each of the movements, and we could verify that the complaints we're getting and that the concerns of the citizens and the legislators can be pinned down to and described with reason. And really, we haven't undertaken any formal or expanded designs on these concepts, but in order to talk about solutions, we did enough engineering work to know that what the impacts of the various solutions would be, and then we estimated the cost of those. It's really just a tool to let decision makers know how much solutions might cost and how they might want to move forward with prioritizing some money. And it's kind of a general overlook, but not very costly study.
Okay, so basically, if I can paraphrase, it's a compilation of technical data that we had, on various individual projects that may have been looked at over the last decade within our department, attempting to consolidate it and then give some cost value to the various technical solutions.
I think that's what I said.
Okay.
And it's a 10,000-foot level reconnaissance, but yeah, that's all right. Just kind of pulling things together and doing some additional work to make sure everything's current.
All right. Thank you. Now, crowd, Mr. Kopp, I believe you have some comments you'd like to make?
Sure.
Fire away.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. The data I noticed was from 2010, and the experience of the Eagle River delegation is that the Artillery Road intersection is increasing in severity as far as the problem where people are heading northbound and pulling in Eagle River morning work traffic. I know that there's several of us that do that every day, 2 or 3 times a day. So the LOS of B there for the AM peak was kind of a challenge to our experience. And you did, the report we felt was excellent overall, and we really appreciate the work. But some of the complexities that weren't really brought out is the fact that northbound exiting lane has a problem if they're trying to get into Eagle River itself. They have to actually cross out of a lane they're stuck into, and they interfere with people coming across the bridge into Eagle River. If you've made that, you know. Do we have that slide that we can pull it up? It's the A3 option.
Hang on a second.
The A3, and we could see. And I guess where I'm going with that is under A3, the delegation feels that there are considerable short-term advantages which would not depreciate enough to fall to being of no value for quite some time.
It's page 14, I believe.
That sounds right, yeah. Yeah, the A3, this was a $16 million option, of which I think there's about $9.5 million that's been set aside for particularly this intersection upgrade. I may not have the numbers quite right, so that leaves a delta of about $7 million. But we did like the fact that this north ramp, Jerry, goes right into the central business district plan. It's a nice flow through. It gets rid of all the hazards. We have a public school right here, a charter school. So you have parents coming in the morning that are actually stacked up here trying to turn left, which impinges on people trying to get into work into Anchorage in the morning, because these people are stacked up trying to go left. You have people here trying to turn right, but this is the lane they're stuck in unless they want to come here to this area where the legislative office is. They actually have to cross over 1 or 2 lanes of traffic to go through this intersection, and that interferes with people coming this way. So this promotes very nice flow through it, and would for years. We weren't sure on how long the build out would be for 3 lanes between Highland and here. But this looked like it would have probably at least 15 years of being a strong benefit for flow-through, unloading the highway coming into Eagle River, because this little deal here backs up so quickly. For those of you that come out of Eagle River or into Eagle River know that particularly in inclement weather, you're braking back here just to take the Eagle River exit, because this is such a short, you get 20 cars here and you're completely backed up to the highway, and this holds about another 10 or 15. And they're just very short. So this gives a beautiful flow through. I think it was the least expensive, Mr. Welch, is that right, of all the options? I think it was down around 16 million.
It was the least expensive of the ones that addressed the problems.
Up that interchange.
On that,
right.
on that side.
Yeah. And it gets rid of all the parents sending their kids to school right over here that are stuck further backing up this lane. And particularly in the winter, this is a problem when they're waiting to turn left and dealing with morning traffic trying to get on the highway coming this way. So, again, the idea was almost an anathema to have to wait till the additional lanes were built before we did anything with the Artillery Road interchange. So that's it in a nutshell, and we just would hope that would be considered.
We developed these alternatives that address the problem with the Bumblebee intersection, as we've come to call it. It seems to work sort of, but because I was confining my study to a very focused look at levels of service, I don't really have the tools, and I didn't feel it was within the scope to go into an in-depth comparison of these various alternatives that address that problem. I agree that this has merit. I believe the others have merit too. But when we start to study these intersections and these modifications, we kind of run afoul of any work that's going on with the Central Business District study. I think it would be a good idea to study these things in more depth.
Yes.
However, with the level of scrutiny we've given this particular and the other alternatives that address this problem, really kind of beyond the scope of an interchange study. Like I say, our numbers show us there's a level of service B there, and you still have traffic backing up onto the highway. And that's a problem with the receivers off of the highway causing the problem, not the interchange itself.
it feels like a level of service F, is what I'm saying.
Well,
I mean,
those are the limitations of a level of service analysis. I understand.
It feels like you're in a real high-risk environment right there, and there's always broken glass in that intersection.
I would not recommend a sign that informs people who are stuck there that they're actually enjoying a very good level of service.
The only other comment the delegation had is this Firehouse Lane here intersects actually with Old Eagle River Road. And these folks right now have to come down to Monty Avenue and do a stop sign here, and then somehow turn left out onto this to go. And if we could just give this a wider turning lane here, they could avoid coming down Old Eagle River Road and doing that U-turn down there at the end and just jump right down here on this improved road and head through this intersection and get on into work or into Eagle River. But we did really appreciate the work. We thought it was outstanding, Mr. Welsh. And we just emphasized that we feel improvements to this interchange to have to wait 20 years to coincide with the widening of the highway. Particularly this area in here is truly a nightmare now. And we just wanted to say that. And that
We do discuss that more in the study than I had today. Your comment about Firehouse Lane causing a little bit of a difficulty there kind of makes my point that when we start looking at that things off of the interchange there, the thing spreads out like a warm breakfast, and we sort of had to try to confine this to the highway corridor. But certainly what your concerns are
and we understand that any work on the interchange would have to not interfere with the widening of the highway in the future.
So let me, did you have anything else, Mr. Flynn? I want to try to put a cap on this if I can.
Yeah, just two real quick things. One little AMATS saying for Mr. Cobb is one miracle to a customer. And two, does this option require any right-of-way acquisition?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Those right-of-way costs are estimated at a planning level in the study.
Yeah.
Again, I want to reiterate that this is just kind of the framework of a starting point for future discussion. And so I think what this does for the legislative contingency or anybody else that wants to talk about it is gives you the parameters for some of the options that are available and some of the costs that may be associated with it. You know, we're always under pretty good scrutiny with our federal dollars these days about where we stretch them and how much money we spend in different locations. We've certainly got a huge pile of needs within our system right now, of which this is clearly one of them. So I would encourage the legislative delegation, to the extent that they're interested in funding one of these things, to make that a priority and come forward. And we will certainly work with them to make sure that we get the right project matched up with the right funding levels to do the best we can.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. You'll be hearing from us.
I look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Welsh. I think that'll do it for you. Great presentation.
I believe next, Kelly Peterson with DOT, and I see Steve Noble back there, but he's probably going to watch like the rest of us.
No more presentations, and we have a report for everybody.
Thank you.
A copy of our final reconnaissance study.
Great, thanks.
Should we leave one for?
Yeah, give it to Craig.
Thank you. So my name is Kelly Peterson. I'm a project manager with DOT Central Region Preliminary Design and Environmental. And I'm here today to present to you the Northern Access to the University Medical District Reconnaissance Study Report. This study was funded by a specific legislative appropriation and was a joint effort by the Department of Transportation and the municipality of Anchorage. The purpose of this study was to analyze circulation and access needs in the University Medical District. And our consultant Steve was here in May with a PowerPoint presentation giving everybody the details of the report while it was in progress. And I am here today to present the final report. This report is the final deliverable for this project. And with this submittal, DOT's work on this project is complete. By definition, a reconnaissance report is a planning level document. It identifies a problem, develops a preliminary purpose and need, identifies and analyzes alternative solutions, compares those alternatives, and recommends alternatives for further evaluation. I wanted to highlight the fact that when DOT generally develops a reconnaissance report, it's an in-house desktop effort that has no public involvement component at all. This northern access to the UMAD district was we had a special emphasis on public involvement because it is a sensitive area and we wanted to make sure that public issues and concerns were heard and addressed. So if I could draw your attention inside the document, behind the title sheet, we put in here a notice to readers. And when we got into the public involvement component, it became apparent we need to let people know our intent behind this report. And to let people know this is not a NEPA document, it's not a decision document, its purpose is not to select a proposed alternative. The purpose of this report is to let people know that this project has been in the AMATS planning queue for many years. The purpose is to give information to AMATS about the area that we've collected and to let people know that the next steps in pursuing a project and what shape or form that pursuit would be is up to AMATS. If you turn to page 11, we outline on page 11 the public participation. It has been very intense for this project. There were meetings with area institutions, stakeholders, utilities, and presentations made to 5 community councils, and this is the second time we've presented to AMATS, both the technical and the policy committees. If you would turn to page 42, you will see the roadway improvement concepts that we investigated, and they are alphabetically labeled A through L. And we really took a 3-pronged approach to solutions for the area. We looked at decreasing the traffic demand, improving existing roadways, and constructing new access to the area. So on page 78, you'll see our analysis criteria and alternatives recommended to be carried forward. So you'll see we did recommend carrying forward the traffic demand management model, G, I, J, and K. So this document was complete in September and posted to the project website, and we sent out an email to the email list, which included the community councils, letting everybody know we'd be taking public comment on the final document for 30 days. During that 30-day comment period, we received 43 comments, and they are included in this document as Appendix A. Of the 43 comments, 12 of them were positive for a project, 18 were negative for any project in the area. 7 people wanted us to know about specific resources that were important to protect if a project were to happen. And 6 people had questions about the website or the report itself. In the back of the report, you'll see a disc that has on it all the supporting documents and the electronic copy of this reconnaissance report. And our supporting documents for this report included an extensive traffic analysis, a geotechnical memorandum, a hydrology and drainage memorandum, a noise analysis, a contaminated soils assessment, a scoping summary report, and a wetlands assessment. So here's our final report, and with that, DOT's work is done. If there's any questions I could answer, I'd be happy.
I'm sure there's a lot of questions. I'm not sure we've got any answers. Mr. Flynn, are you ready yet?
I'm staying out of this one. I got enough problems.
Wow. I might want to throw some kerosene on somebody else's fire.
No, that's okay. Maybe tomorrow.
Mr. Michaelis, do you have any?
Well, you know, after reading the disclaimer up front, so to speak, what's the next step?
I guess from my perspective, the next step is AMATS or some other body decides that they want to move this project forward, and they should put it in the project list, and it gets developed as any other project in the community would under AMATS jurisdiction.
I don't have any other questions.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, Ms. Edwards, do you have anything that you want to
No,
comment on this?
no, I thought the report, I looked at it online, I thought it was very well done.
Good. I'm going to make a couple comments. I guess I want to say, first of all, thanks, Kelly, for you and Steve and your team for doing this project. I know it went quite a bit beyond where we thought we were going to be when we took on what we thought was kind of a simple engineering cost analysis for some route selections, and it turned into a little bit of a public involvement deal, and I've certainly been involved in a few of those, and I know it's not a painless process to go through, but I think that you guys persevered, and I haven't read the report in its final form, but I certainly read chapters of it leading up to this, and from what I saw, it was a good effort, so I appreciate that. I want to expand a little bit and say that this is an interesting project. Like so many of our projects, it has a local flavor, but it also has a bigger flavor, and one of the things that we see as the overall committee here in AMATS responsible for transportation in this community is we get spillover effect from some of these areas that really have an impact on our entire grid system. And when we talk about UNet access, a lot of people are concerned about their neighborhood values, and that's a concern. But what we see is the university continuing to expand, drawing more and more people into their system. We see Providence Hospital expanding, drawing more people into their system. We see sports arenas being built in this location, drawing people into that. And all these people need access into these facilities. And so what happens is we start to see the spillover effect on Lake Otis, we start to see the spillover effect on Tudor Road, and so it is really not just a local neighborhood issue, and I think that there's a real balancing act that we're going to have to do for this project. But I would certainly say that from my perspective, both the university and Providence have got to step to the forefront on this and really work with the communities to make sure that everybody understands their plans for development and some of the impacts those plans are having on this part of town. It's a pretty significant issue. So I think that moving forward, that's going to be one of the key things that we need to look forward to is working with those groups to make sure that we are all on the same page about where we're going. Any of these solutions, really is predicated on future development, I think, as much as anything that's out there right now. So it's a big deal. So with that, I will say, does anybody from the audience have any further comments or questions for Ms. Peterson while she's here? Okay. Thanks, Kelly, for your presentation. Craig, are we getting anywhere here?
I think this is it.
Yeah, we have one last thing to do.
Last creature here is Mr. Rudolph will give us the obligation report for the first quarter, which you have in front of you.
Okay.
20 fiscal year 2012.
Bart Rudolph, AMATS Transportation Planner for DOT. This is the report with the green header on the top. Obligation reports come to this committee every quarter, but I'll quickly go over the layout just to remind everyone. The list of wake up. The list of projects on here is what's in our adopted tip. The first colored column, which is like a real light purple, that is the funding amounts that are programmed in the draft tip amendment 3 that is out for public comment. So it has not been technically approved by this committee yet, but it is what we are shooting for when we are planning to program funds for future projects. The next column is what's been obligated since the first quarter. This is probably likely going to be mostly zeros just because it's only been 3 months and the funding levels haven't been approved in the tip yet. And then the blue column is what we anticipate to obligate this year. I'll just quickly highlight some of the main ones. Huffman Road, if you look at the second project down, there were some construction overruns from what we had. We actually de-obligated money last year from the low bids, and now we'll come back through construction and we're adding a couple $1 million to cover those overruns. The next project down is Eagle River Road Rehab. This is a large chunk of our program this year, almost $9 million. We also anticipate to AC $18.5 million from next year to fully fund this project to get it done this year. Further down the list, if you look at the pavement replacement program, it's at $12.3 million. That's the Diamond Road resurfacing project. That's the largest project that we have this year in our TIP, so we're watching that one closely to make sure it gets obligated in time. Dowling Road, we're de-obligating almost $4 million due to a low bid. So a similar situation to like we did Huffman, the bid comes in low, we de-obligate that money and use it for something else. And then all of the de-obligations in this report can go towards construction overruns in the future, but for planning purposes, we de-obligate now based on the low bid. Everything else, if you go to the second page, in the back, the top part of that are de-obligations of projects that we've closed, so that adds to the balance this year. The transportation enhancement projects, the big project this year is Glen Highway Trail Rehab, $5.1 million, and then we're adding a few $1,000s to the area-wide trails program and the bicycle plan projects that we had programmed last year, so there are a few overruns there. If you go to the third page, this is our mostly CMAC projects. Everything is on pace here to obligate as planned is what's in the tip. There are some more de-obligations down there at the bottom. And the last page on the back is where we talk about the totals. If you look about 5 lines down, it's total AMATS allocation. In the tip, we're planning for a $36.3 million program. We anticipate right now between the obligations and the de-obligations at $32.9 million. So we have about a $3.3 million wiggle room right now to handle construction overruns or to add to other projects. If we have this money left over by the fourth quarter, we can always put it into Eagle River Road and AC less money from next year's program. So that's basically what happens. And then the last 2 tables down there are just NHS projects and some generally funded projects for your information that are not part of the tip. But if you have any questions, I'll take them now.
Mr. Flynn?
Just, if I recall correctly, we're not using any AC money this year, right?
No, we...
Because they use the stimulus money to clear all that out.
Right.
Good, thanks.
Edwards? Anybody from the audience? I don't think I have any further comments either. Thanks for the update.
That's it.
It appears from the audience. So, no further informational items. Do we have any committee comments? Mr. Flynn? Mr. Kales? Ms. Edwards?
I just wanted to thank the presenters today. We've covered a lot of material and I think they did a great job.
Yeah, I think most of them left, but in absentia, we thank them.
Yes.
I agree. Okay, I don't have any further comments either, so unless I have any objection, I will adjourn our meeting.